All right, welcome back to Sharpe in the Morning. It's 6:38 now at News Talk 550 KFYI. And joining us this morning is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's a practicing physician here in the Valley. Considers himself a devout Muslim and founded AIFD after the 9/11 attacks on the U.S., as he describes it, an effort to provide an American Muslim voice advocating for the preservation of the founding principles of the United States Constitution and the separation of mosque and state. Dr. Jasser, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, Jim. Thanks for having me.
As Nidal Hassan actually goes, Nidal Hassan goes, on trial here, he actually has admitted. He said, I was the evidence will clearly show that I am the shooter. And he said, he calls himself a mujahideen, and he says he's an imperfect soldier trying to form a perfect religion. I apologize for any mistakes I made in this endeavor. He's not apologizing for killing his fellow soldiers. He's apologizing for maybe not carrying out his attack as effectively as he could have. And what's very interesting is that you have a very similar background to Hassan in that you earned your medical degree on a military scholarship. Your parents immigrated to the U.S., you had a long military career. How did you go the path of respecting, the American way of life, and Nidal Hassan goes the way of, Islamist extremism?
Yeah, I know this is a core story to this trial, and it's unfortunate it's not getting the attention that some of the other trials we've seen in the last few months get, because at the central part of this story is what makes the narrative of individuals like Nidal Hassan become not only traitors and commit acts of treason, but commit acts of heinous barbarism in the name of one of the world's largest religion that's practiced by 25% of the world's population. And the story is one of allegiance to America.
Good evening. My name is John.
Oh, sorry about that. Some bad sound.
The story is one of patriotism and belief in the American Constitution. And Nidal Hassan served and decided to wear the uniform because he wanted to basically enact a larger goal of political Islam, which is to achieve hegemony globally against the West, against liberty. So he did it as a means to an end, took in some of the narrative that Muslims are victims, that the American military is against Islam and against Muslims, and he went down this path and was sucked in. Initially, the Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups in America start to tell Muslims that America's anti-Muslim and they're bigots, and they slide into the sense of victimization, and that leads into becoming part of the global jihad. And Nidal Hassan is not the first one. Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, said the same thing, that he was participating in the global jihad. And, my family taught me that there was no place better to be a Muslim and to be free than in America, that in fact jihad, the time of a political state, is done. The Prophet Muhammad may have been the leader of a state or an Islamic state, but that time has been preceded and bettered by a country like America where we separate mosque and state. And we as Muslims need to own up to the fact that we need to reform the ideas of theocracy and target these ideas globally, like the Muslim Brotherhood that took over Egypt in the last year, or like Iran and Saudi Arabia and other countries that are run by Sharia law. And until we as Americans start to realize that this is a new Cold War, that the Nidal Hassans are simply a symptom of a bigger conflict between the West and Islamic states and jihadism, we're going to continue to sort of treat these. I mean, look at the Rolling Stone cover. We said, oh, wow, it was so offensive that they glamorized him. Well, unfortunately, the face of terrorism is, unfortunately, the Muslim next door. People that may look like me, but ultimately it's an ideological struggle. It's not that they need to be wearing jumpsuits and wearing beards, but the fact that inside their head is an allegiance to a global movement that hates America, hates freedom, and doesn't want Muslims to be free. Remember, the target of Nidal Hassan, he killed a Muslim in this rampage. They believe moderate Muslims are the primary enemy. So we need to separate this narrative and say, and that's why I really wrote my book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam. The primary chapter in it that I wrote last year talks about Nidal Hassan and really what made me different from him.
Do you think we focus as Americans, and the U.S. government does, in trying to keep us safe? Do you think we focus too much on what's been described as the kinetic war, the shootings, the bombings, the kidnappings, these other acts of terrorism, even though Hassan's act has been described as workplace violence. Instead of focusing in on the political warfare, the influence operations, what some people would describe as the subversion of our foundational institutions. In other words, going after political, educational, religious, and media interests as opposed to, the actual act of picking up a weapon and shooting someone.
Well, this is exactly what Steve Emerson, for example, called the Grand Deception, which is the groups in the West that are part of the Islamist movement have taken advantage of religious freedom in order to prevent us from having this conversation. And then meanwhile, the Al-Qaeda, the militant versions of the Islamists, have outed that these guys may be nonviolent in some permutations, but otherwise they have militant manifestations that try to push America out from their countries, make us isolationist, make us shut 22 embassies when they just have a simple threat, pull out so that they can start taking control. And the war is not going to be won kinetically. This is a war, just like we beat the Soviets through a peace through strength, through demonstrating that we weren't going to bend to the evil empire. This is currently, the terror war is a whack-a-mole program. Yeah. And you're going to continue to whack moles until you start to fight where in Iran, the majority of the Iranians don't want to live under theocracy. In Egypt, you had the largest demonstrations in humanity against Islamism, against what drives people like Nidal Hassan. But meanwhile, America is sitting on our hands, withdrawing, becoming the paper tiger, and telling these free thinkers that we're not going to support them. And they, in the meantime, need to get support from the Russias of the world, Chinas of the world, the Irans, etc., and they're shifting more towards even worse autocracies.
I hate to spring this on you, but you have a few moments you could hang with us after the break. I had a quick question I want to ask you about Muslim Brotherhood's influence inside the United States, which I think is very scary in some ways, and I think most people aren't even aware of it at all. We're talking with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. It's 6:45 at Sharp in the Morning. Welcome back to Sharp in the Morning. It is 6:51, News Talk 550 KFYI. Our guest is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, which advocates for the preservation of the founding principles of the United States Constitution. And Dr. Jasser is quite well known for speaking out against radical Islamists. Dr. Jasser, thanks again for being with us. And I wanted to talk a little bit, you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood. I want to talk a little bit about their influence here in the United States and how some folks that may not be exactly in the Muslim Brotherhood but are certainly affiliated or have the same ideology have access to the White House.
Yeah, it's very important that Americans understand this. This is not a small group. It's not a conspiracy theory. Remember, the Brotherhood got 30% of the vote in Egypt, a country of 80 million people. It's a movement that includes some have estimated 20 to 25% of the world's 1.4 billion Muslims. So this is a large movement. And if you look at Obama's policy, the left really is tone deaf to any type of theocratic Islamist movement, and they've used the Muslim groups in order to check the box that they take care of minorities and religious persecution, etc. So what's happened is, in America in the late 60s, the Muslim Student Association, funded by petrodollars from Saudi and these Islamist interests, set up shop and have since flourished into multiple groups that I call Muslim Brotherhood legacy groups. They're not card-carrying members, but they are part of the same ideology, the belief that when you're in a minority like America, you simply follow the laws of the land, but when you're a majority, you put into place Islamic states with Sharia law, and you want to dominate the world through hegemony of Islamic states against the West, against liberty. And if you look who's surrounding President Obama, people like Mohammed El-Bieri, people like Dalia Mujahid, and others that have guided his policy. So when you wonder why it seems like we're sympathetic to groups like the Brotherhood, why the president's been silent in criticizing the Brotherhood for a year, and then you have a coup that happens, and all of a sudden he's critical of the Second Revolution 2.0 and isn't really standing behind the people of Egypt, it's because the advisors he brings in, I mean, Jim, a month ago he brought in a radical cleric from Saudi Arabia whose only credit on his resume is that he's anti-Al-Qaeda. Well, there's a lot of enemies of our enemies that are our enemy also. So it doesn't mean the litmus test they use is that they're against Al-Qaeda, so they must be our friend. And if you look at this guy, he supported slavery, he supported the persecution of women and other things, and this guy, Bin Bayat, was brought in by Obama's advisors to sort of guide our policy. And Homeland Security, meanwhile, puts out policies saying that our Department of Homeland Security should not work with quote-unquote reformers, like our group at the American Islamic Forum and so many others. So when Americans say, where are the moderate voices, we're being snuffed out of Washington by the Brotherhood groups that are dominating policy.
Wow. And by the way, for those who don't know, the Brotherhood's creed is God is our objective, the Quran is our law, the Prophet is our leader, jihad is our way, and death for the sake of Allah is the highest of our aspirations. It doesn't sound like like a really peaceful way to go there. But, you know, I don't know. Dr. Jasser, I appreciate your time, and I told you this off the air, but I want to tell everybody, I want everybody to hear me say this. I so appreciate your voice in this debate, and what should be a much stronger debate in this country. Unfortunately, those in positions of power decide as, I'll put it in my words, kowtow to these people that have radical intentions. So thank you, and it's a truly you're a jewel, a local jewel that we're so lucky to have you here in the Valley.
Well, I appreciate it. You're the best. You know, it's not going away from Boston to this trial, and sadly, unfortunately, we're going to have other incidents, and until we take this on head on, the way Americans have done in our history. But so far, we need to wake up to it. So I really appreciate your courage in bringing this topic to us.
All right. Dr. Jasser, have a great day. Appreciate it again. That's Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, which he founded after the 9/11 attacks. And he says provides an American Muslim voice advocating for the preservation of the founding principles of the U.S. Constitution, liberty and freedom. Believes in the separation of mosque and state, which a lot of these, well, not a lot, Islamists believe that, things should be run by the mosque.
That's right.
Everywhere.